Hello, and thanks for joining my webinar today. My name is Chris Condo, Principal Analyst with Forrester. Today, we're going to be talking about the benefits of value stream management, and thanks very much for joining. So first, let's just get into it. Get my slides going here. So let's take a look at the current state of many enterprises. Not every enterprise, but a lot of enterprises are going through this right now, right? They don't necessarily have a system of trust when they work with their different teams. So instead of having complete trust in their teams to deliver the right kinds of value and outcomes, they have very cumbersome processes, lots of meetings, lots of things going on. It's kind of annoying, to be quite honest. Instead of visibility into what's happening, they have constant meetings, right? Like, what's the progress? How are we doing on our agile delivery? How are we doing on work items? How are we getting all these things done? Because there's no data into their process. There's no sort of definitive guide to what's going on, what's the flow, what's happening. So instead of there's all these meetings, and not only are there meetings, there's meetings of meetings, right? There's the meeting of all meetings. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And then after all these meetings where every day you have a meetup, and then weekly the dev leads get together and they talk about it, or the product management leads, they talk about it. Then there's this other process where at the end of the day, or at the end of the month, somebody has to run around and figure out what are all the current states of everybody that's working on stuff. And so there's just really lack of visibility. In place of outcomes, because we're not really sure what the outcomes are supposed to be sometimes, because we're all in our own separate world, we think about outputs. How many stories did I create in the backlog? Or how many stories did I create and put into source code management? Or how many issues did I check off the list? Or, what's our uptime, or things like that. Some of those things are useful, but when it's just outputs, sometimes it gets a little bit lost in translation. And then in place of alignment, where every team understands the direction they're going in, we get sort of process metrics, right? Each individual silo kind of works in their own way. And so what you end up with is everybody kind of going in a different direction, right? And so kind of the typical scenario, or the best anecdotal way to look at it is, if you're an operations engineer, you're an SRE, you're thinking about, I really want to make sure our systems have uptime and stability, and that we keep things working in a very, very good manner. But if you're a developer, like, I want to go fast, I want to get things done, I have a lot of work items to get through, and I'm thinking about just going faster and faster. And the problem is speed and stability don't always go together. And when these teams have separate metrics, separate ways in which they're governed or even judged on their reviews, like at the end of the year, if you're an operations person and you're judged by speed, well, maybe that's okay. But if you're not, if you're just judged by stability, you're thinking, oh, what's in it for me? Doesn't matter to me if the developer team is going slow. I just care about stability. I care about security. I care about things that are very important to the enterprise. And if you're a developer, you're like, geez, I got to get things done. I got to get things moving. I got to automate more. And so creates a lot of friction within the organization. Everybody ends up pulling in a different direction. It's not really good for anyone. So what do we really want? We want something that's going to help us align around outcomes, right? And when we think about value stream management, we think about the idea of like getting everybody kind of rowing in the same direction, right? And instead of like thinking about individual process metrics, which are important, right? The process metrics are important, but at the end of the day, when you need to be aligned, it's really around outcomes. So for example, if you're developing new applications, or you're delivering new software, or you're delivering a transaction processing system, whatever you're delivering, right? There are things that are outcomes. Did you improve the uptime, right? So if you're working on something in the backlog, it's really important to know is like, what is the purpose of this item in the backlog? Is it to do something? And are we going to measure it at the end of the day? And so the idea behind value stream management is that it gets you thinking about the outcomes. Different outcomes could be like page load time, right? It's kind of a proxy metric for measuring customer satisfaction. But in general, if page load time is slow, most customers aren't satisfied. If your API response rate is low, most transactions might fail. And so all of those things are proxy metrics that help understand what is the overall impact that any particular effort has. And when everybody has shared metrics, like when the development team and the operations team and the product management team or the test team, whoever you want to put into your mix, own something like improving page load time, they find ways to work together, they find ways to get things done. And then they both collectively own the fact that, hey, we need to get this fixed out the door quickly. Stability is important, but page load time stinks because the last patch we did really ruined it. So let's get let's help the dev team go fast. And so that's how you get these things aligned, right? So let's talk about a little bit more in detail how this all happens. So the interesting thing about the software delivery lifecycle, and I still call it that because it's a useful term. Some people think it's passe, but there is a life cycle, right? Ideas get created. Hopefully they're based on analytics that come from the customers that are using it, or from the field, or from the systems that you're measuring from a performance perspective. You know, there's planning, there's different areas of technology that overlaps this. And so in theory, this whole thing is one big continuous loop, right? There's continuous testing, there's value stream management, there's collaborative work management, there's all these things going on at the same time. And so they all sort of intersect, but sometimes they have hard boundaries. And those boundaries create the friction point. And so what we really want is the system, value stream management, to really come in and inject in the middle this level of connectivity. It doesn't necessarily have to, in fact, it doesn't necessarily replace any of those individual tools. So value stream management doesn't do analysis of your, of the value delivered, or the metrics that you're collecting from the field. It doesn't do planning. It doesn't do building, testing, or operating, but it connects to those tools, and it might connect to the data of those tools or the actual tools themselves. And it creates, in some cases, bi-directional flow of data. In other cases, it just creates analytics. Every vendor's got kind of like a different flavor of value stream management these days. But the idea is that you've got data-driven analytics, you can apply governance, you can do process mapping, and it all comes into a common data model where these different data points from these different parts of the software delivery lifecycle can be coalesced into something that is rationalized. How long did it take for a project or a product plan to get executed? How long did it take through each individual step? And at the end of the day, when we're operating it and we're measuring the value, did we actually achieve it? And then you can feed it up and you can feed it down. So if you're in operations, or you're in building, or planning, or whatever, you can say, hey, what am I working on? Why am I working on it? What are the overall goals of this thing? And if you're planning and trying to do your budgeting, you can look downstream and say, what did it cost us to actually deliver this? How long did it take us to do it? Are we actually working as efficiently as we could? What's our resource plan? So value stream management really helps connect all these things together. And that's how we kind of try to get people working in the same direction. So here's one of the interesting things that's happening though, right? Modern app dev teams have expanded responsibilities. And so if you think about like this is a very, traditional organization. There's a CIO, there's a development, there's operations. It might be that your development team reports to a CTO and the CIO is separate. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is on the left-hand side where there's development, application development is moving into infrastructure engineering, right? You hear a lot about GitOps these days, and the idea that development teams now own some of the infrastructure definition. Application development also has this you write it, you own it mantra, right? Where they're moving over into application support. And they might not be first line support, but they're certainly, the DRI, the designated responsible individual, is on call to help support the application support team, to help them pinpoint where issues are and try to resolve issues very quickly. And in the infrastructure support side, you're seeing maybe not developers moving into infrastructure support, but you're certainly seeing infrastructure support and operational folks adopting application development like principles. The book from Google about site reliability engineering has really caused a lot of people think about infrastructure and operations as another development principle. And so those things are certainly going forward. But what does this mean? It means there's more responsibility. It means that SDLC that we talked about, which like back in my day of coding was somebody gives you a story, you write everything into a big monolith, and then you send it down to test, and then they take it and they put it in a package and they deploy it, right? Those days are gone. Development teams now own so many different pieces of the entire application lifecycle puzzle. It's really hard to get a handle on it. And so that's why, and then, I'm kind of jumping the gun there, and then the tendency to automate all these different touch points is also creating other challenges, right? So if you're a development mind and you're thinking automation first, you're thinking, I'm going to build automate, I'm going to test automate, I'm going to release automate. I got pipeline as code, I've got applications code, I got infrastructure as code. All these systems are running, but all of them, on the surface are a black box. They create lots of log files, but trying to connect those things is like trying to connect two needles in a haystack. And so the challenges of these more complex systems, and don't forget, I didn't really mention it, but who can't mention microservices, right? The idea that not only are we shifting from monoliths in some of the automation to manage them, but multiple different code streams happening at the same time, all of them with codependencies on each other. Understanding those dependencies is very complicated. And so what you end up having is like a software delivery lifecycle that has a stream of code something, build it, test it, get it out the door. But then you can't really get out the door unless you know all the other dependencies. Well, what are those other software delivery life cycles? What are all the other automation pieces that are going on? How do I manage all that stuff? And so without a way to sort of dive into that data in a very cohesive way, it's really easy to get lost. So that's why we talk about value stream management and the idea that it maps the actual software delivery lifecycle. This is our basic value stream map. You've probably seen it a few times if you've been watching any of my webinars. The idea that it shows you all the steps. It also reveals all the organizational dependencies. And more importantly, and probably what needs to be updated on this map is that just before you get to release into the operation side, you need to understand the other codependencies on other value streams. And so what many organizations tell us is that, first of all, doing this mapping exercise not only illustrates all the steps needed to create software, which some people intrinsically know when they're working in these value streams, but their management often doesn't realize, geez, I didn't realize how codependent development and business analysis and the account team and the operations and security and the testers were. I kind of figured they looked at them all discretely, but when you look at it this way, it's one complete flow. There's really something else that needs to be done here. Maybe these teams need to be joined more succinctly in a product team. And so we're seeing a lot of companies that execute on a value stream management process actually say, the most important thing that we did was organizational change. We brought these teams together into product teams, and that it's by itself really helped us align around what the impact we want. Then we started thinking about how do we automate, how we do all the other things that come with value stream management. So the other thing that, so I guess I was kind of leading myself there, but with value stream management, we discovered these hidden product teams, right? We used to have all these silos. Now we understand that there's an importance to integrated product teams. And so I'm doing research with my colleague, Charles Betts. We're doing the research called The Future of DevOps. And almost every single vendor we've interviewed, almost every single client we've interviewed that is using DevOps has talked about the whole project to product journey that they're on. That the idea that moving to a product team is really important to them because they really want to be focused on impact. And that doing a value stream map, doing these exercises is actually critical to formulating what the product team should be. And so this is really exciting and really helpful. The other thing that they tell us is that, you find these codependencies, like maybe on security, and you say, well, maybe I can't put a security engineer on every single product team, but I could have security as a service. They could have security as a product service to the rest of the development teams. Or, we could have agile coaches or architects. All of these people provide services to these product teams. And when you think about it that way, and you think about it as a services model, then they can think about how they're serving the integrated product teams the best that they possibly can. Previous to that, everyone was just in a silo. Everyone just did their own thing. They worried about those different discrete issues. They didn't think about the idea that what we really need to do is create these really successful integrated product teams, and we're all part of that equation. So, when that happens, you end up getting this like connectivity back to business value, right? So if you have a structure like an OKR, you can use that to filter down to the various different smaller metrics that, or individual metrics, I don't want to call them small, but the individual KPIs that each domain of expertise might track. If you're in product or dev or operations, you still want to track individual metrics, but what you want to know is, why am I tracking these metrics and what are they going to add up to? And so at the end of the day, what you really want is each team each individual domain kind of focused on delivering an entire amount of value to your customers and to the business. So one of the interesting things that's happened is this is the VSM ecosystem circa 2020. It's already changed. There's probably double the number of vendors that we could include in this, this, I guess you call it a Venn diagram of sorts, you know, ranging from portfolio management to performance monitoring. Whereas in the past, you know, some of these vendors that are on the outskirts would ask me like, why are we included in this value stream management research? Now they're asking to be included in the research because they understand that, you know, providing insights on the monitoring side is really part of delivering value to your customers. If you're managing a portfolio of products, you really need to understand the value you're delivering. You need to understand the number of resources that it takes to deliver that project. You need to understand the number of and the cost that it takes to deliver that product to your customers. And so portfolio vendors see value stream management tools as data to feed their whole portfolio management. And if you're downstream in your one of the APM tools, you're thinking about monitoring and becoming the feedback loop. And if you're in the middle of all this, you're thinking about how do I help developers be more productive? How do I help product planners make the right decisions when they're triaging bugs and triaging issues and figuring out what the priority is? And if you're in test, or if you're in any other of these disciplines that these particular tools touch upon, it helps you make the right decision at any point in time, whether you're planning for the future or whether you're working on something right now. What you don't want to be is what some of the companies I work with, we at Forrester, we get inquiries from client users. And like I got one the other day where the client says, I have 60,000 items in my backlog. And my first question was, well, how do you prioritize that? And they're like, well, we prioritize it based on the order it comes in the backlog and, some business priorities. And so I asked, well, is anybody measuring the impact of these changes? Do you have any way of knowing who's using the software that's related to these backlogs? And do you know, based on that, how to prioritize? Like maybe there's a lot of those backlog items you can get rid of because nobody's actually using any of those features that the backlog pertains to. And we don't have any of that insight. We have none of that visibility. And furthermore, we don't own the ability to actually manage the backlog. And so when you think about that, that's almost the worst case scenario, right? You've got a business team creating a bunch of requirements and a bunch of work items. You have a development team that needs to simply check those items off and get them done as quickly as possible. And then you're putting stuff out the door that you have no idea whether it delivers value. Building a value stream management solution collectively from a number of the vendors that fit into this space and all the newer vendors that are entering the space can really be beneficial to creating a complete picture for how you're going to actually manage software in a constructive way. What if you found out that half the stuff that was in the backlog was in software products that nobody used? You could simply delete it. You'd have half your backlog. You could work on things that are more important. When we think about value stream management, we think about segmenting them. And this is, again, from 2020. We're revamping this research for this year, and I'm really excited about it. We're reaching out to a lot of vendors, some of them from our past research, but a lot of new vendors that have entered this space, and we're really excited about it. We thought about value stream management in terms of an integrated value stream management solution, one that maybe comes with a CI/CD tool that's part of a whole vendor package. We thought about standalone VSM solutions as well. These are tools that they sell standalone that overlay onto your individual heterogeneous tools. And we thought about value stream management tools as discrete entities, something that collects measurement, something that actually tracks time, something that can measure value delivered, those sorts of things. And so we're really excited. Maybe we're going to be expanding upon this. I'm not sure. We're doing research right now to understand what is the new set of functionality that's needed. What are users expecting from value stream management? And how can we best serve, how can those tools best serve the clients and what they need? So in summary, value stream management just gets you asking the right questions, right? This is one of the best benefits, right? Who is the customer? What do they need? What impact are we having? How do we measure impact, right? That's a big question that many companies don't have answered. How can we increase the value delivered? What metrics and KPIs are the best ones to track? How do we measure success, right? This research, I asked the Pendo team if they had updated, but they haven't yet. It's unfortunately a few years old, but it's very valuable. The idea that maybe 75% of the features have very little value to your customers, right? There might be things like this. I mean, this is like, typically externally facing, but we talk to companies all the time. They have a portfolio of thousands of applications within their enterprise that only serve employees. And I'm like, well, how many people are using them? They're like, we don't know. And it's like, you need to track that information. You need to know, is it important to maintain this software? What value are you delivering? Are they using it because maybe it's not even accessible? Maybe it would be useful if it was. And you need to have all these, if you're not thinking about things in terms of a value stream and delivering value to your customer, then you kind of miss the big picture. The big picture is you just spent a lot of money on a development team, an operations team, and a product planning team to deliver some software to someone. Doesn't it make sense to measure the impact it's having and use that measurement to gauge your next steps for what to do? It doesn't make any sense if you don't have a GPS or some sort of like internal map that tells you, how are we delivering value? Are we delivering the right value? And are we there yet? And if we're not there yet, what do we need to do to get there? Value stream management feeds back into the business. One of the most important things that I tell development leaders, and I know that the value stream management sounds like, it's only for financial people, it's only for business people, and that's not true. Value stream management is very beneficial to development leads. It helps them explain the value that they're delivering on a day-to-day basis. It helps them explain the speed bumps they run into on a day-to-day basis. And when that kind of information is captured real time on a regular basis, it can be tracked over time. Here's how we're doing on delivering on issues, on new features. Here's our flow. Here's our KPIs that we're tracking. This is all the critical data that's showing how we're improving our engineering process. When you can take that and feed it back into your financial budget, now your CTO has information that he can feed or she can feed to the overall budgeting gods and say, look, our team is struggling because we have all these restrictions on what we can deliver, when we can deliver, and all these boundaries. Look, we don't have the right sets of automation in place to actually automate tests or to actually automate delivery. We need more training on GitOps. If you don't have the data, you don't have the hard data, and you're not able to track it over time, it just becomes empty arguments or shallow arguments at best. And what you really want to do is feed that back in. So value stream management, yeah, it's a financial construct. The idea of delivering value is financial. But at the end of the day, your company is on this earth to make money for the most part. Not every company, but most part. And whatever you can do as Mr., Mrs., Ms. development lead to deliver a message of the value you're delivering to your leaders is only going to help your particular place, your particular argument for how you're going to improve your team moving forward. This pretty much says it all, right? With value stream management, you're connecting all these, individual horizontal organizations, PM, dev, test ops, but you're also providing data as it aggregates up the tree from individual contributor to director, VP to CIO, CTO, right? That information is really hard to gather. It's very hard. You have someone who runs around, like I said earlier, to cube to cube or Zoom call to Zoom call to figure out, how are you? Where are you doing it? What's going on? And when you can take data and aggregate it up and get that view, it's only good. It's only helpful. It only enlightens and brings to light what's going on. Well, anyways, that's my talk on value stream management, the benefits of value stream management. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with your value stream management journey.